I will have a very polarized view of things because it's illustrative. Coming from Lebanon, therefore from the Levantine part of the southern Mediterranean, one could easily say, well, really, let's forget about things until later, because our part of the world is so stressed militarily, conflictually, and politically that things are extremely uncertain. Nobody can guess how things will move. There are two countries which are blowing apart. We don't know what shape they will have, and they have incredible effect on what's around them. I speak for Lebanon. Jordan will speak later for itself. But for Lebanon, it's very extreme. It affects our internal politics. We don't have a president. Our parliament meets very irregularly. There's almost no public policy. It's a waiting policy. Our exporters have problems because our traditional routes to our biggest markets in the Gulf, even to Iraq itself, go through Syria and sometimes Iraq. And insurance rates are straight through the ceiling. There's danger to every shipment you send. There are delays in time. You have to reroute and everything. Inside the country, as I said, things are very difficult to manage because the political situation is so fragile. We even have certain times of insecurity, military insecurity. We had fighting a couple of weeks ago. But life goes on, and sometimes very intensely at the same time. Moving to the other side, in spite of all this, things can be done. Our central bank moves on its own because it has that ability in our legal system anyway. We used to be a very, very private sector-based country. And in recent times, it has done a few things. They have tightened up the atmosphere on capital adequacy, on risk calculation, and so on. Our banks are very highly capitalized. So that is being tightened, and that is as it should be. Our banks are exposed, as has been said, to the government to a great extent, but then they're being pushed to retain their profits, to capitalize extra, and our ratios are way beyond what the Bank of International Settlements is asking for the coming years. We have already passed that a long time ago. The central bank, on the other hand, is doing easing matters. So as banks have to have certain ratios of liquidity placed with the central bank in Lebanese currency, they're allowing the banks to use it for certain economic activities, including supporting small and medium enterprises, the innovation sector, and so on. The central bank, knowing that our equity financing part of the country is weak, has put in a caveat for the banks to be able to enter the equity markets through a system of separation, however, where they can use 3% of their equity, of which they have very high ratios, to participate through venture capital funds and so on at a distance in financing not just startups but growth companies, which can then expand into the world markets, especially in the field of the knowledge economy, since we have a country which happens to have a high level of tertiary education. We have had ancient universities, and huge numbers of our people go and get educated throughout the rest of the world. So you have to concentrate on what can be done. And the private sector does that on its own. So our people are finding different ways of exporting, and we are reconcentrating our markets. There are huge Lebanese populations in Africa, so our firms are opening African markets, Latin American markets, because we also have diasporas there. And they have opened our, let's say, culinary system, which is very popular in very many parts of the world. So those are lines of export for our small enterprises in the field of agroalimentary, food, and drinks. Our wines are exporting, our drink sector is exporting. And we are actually expanding into European and American markets in sectors where things can happen. Our great export is our population. So our population is removing its temporary emigration in different directions, from the Gulf and from Iraq and so on, further into Africa or again into the financial sector centers, which then become areas for export. This is marginal, but in effect, this is how one can view the world. Our part of the world is completely dangerous, but danger can be dealt with. They're not just risky, they are dangerous zones. But even danger can be dealt with. We had a 15-year-old war once, but 90% of our banking sector, we used to have 97 banks, survived. The core survived very well to relaunch. We are passing through very difficult times. Now, the other countries of the region are in different zones of risk and danger, but in effect, you have to maintain macroeconomic prudence, banking prudence, financial sector prudence, but at the same time become adventurous in other areas. And small and medium enterprises can be more adventurous, and if they're well supported, they will find new markets. Just to give a bit of optimism to the whole unoptimistic scene. Thank you.
Thank you.